like it or not, that's getting a lot of traction is the idea of raising fuel duty by 5p. Part of the reason for that is it's been a long time since it went up. There are all sorts of reasons. Howard Cox is the co-founder of the Fair Fuel UK campaign. Howard, do you believe this one, or is it one of my many kites?
That's a lovely way of describing it. I really did like. I'm going to use that. Very, very good.
You're welcome.
Yeah. Well, I've been campaigning for 10 years with a lot of MPs, and I've been through quite a few. But Robert Halfond, who appears on your programmes quite a lot, he's Mr. Fairfield UK in Parliament, and he's heard rumours that Rishi Sunak is going to be putting up fuel duty. I've got, that's why it was on the front page of The Sun today. I notified The Sun that I got some very credible evidence from the Treasury. Not quite a whistleblower, but someone did let me know that they're looking at double-digit increases in fuel duty. They were doing dynamic modelling on 10p increase in fuel duty, but I think they've settled on around about the 5p. Now, my belief is that they won't do it. It'd be madness, because when we see the actual unemployment figures rocketing up, the last thing you want to do is put a tax up that impacts, it's a regressive tax, impacts on low-income drivers and small businesses more than any other tax available. So in answer to your question, I'm 50-50 on this one. I think it's unlikely to go ahead.
Yeah, but it's interesting. A lot of people listening will be of an age who will remember the escalator and going,
Yes.
way. Yeah, I mean, it's like we used to call it sin taxes when I used to present budget programmes. 5p on a packet of fags and 10p on a bottle of whiskey and this, that, and the other. Up would go petrol and what have you, because that was keeping people off the road. But fuel tax frozen has had a heck of a good run. I mean, it has not moved for a decade.
No, I mean,
it's sitting there, isn't it? If you were Rishi Sunak, you'd think, I'll have a bit of that because no one will remember.
Well, I'm afraid that every single Chancellor, and I've outlived them for the last 10 years, because, and I have actually been involved with all of them, and we've put some very cogent reasons why you shouldn't put fuel duty up. We are still, even despite this fuel duty freeze, we're still one of the highest, if not the highest, tax drivers in the world. And that's the thing that they look at this 10-year freeze, oh, you've had it so good. No, we're still paying the most tax in the world as a motorist, particularly on diesel and petrol. And what we need to do, and I've worked very closely with the CEBR over the last 5 or 6 years, who are an independent economic analyst group, and they have worked out that by cutting fuel duty generates more jobs, reduces inflation, increases GDP, and increases business investment, and improves consumer spending.
Well, funnily, you haven't mentioned this, but I just offer it to you on behalf of one of my listeners who very kindly tweeted in just now, saying the other thing is if you increase the fuel duty, it'll make it more expensive if you really do seriously want to try and get people back to work.
Yeah, absolutely right, Alastair. I mean, there is a number of issues. I've got in front of me little bullet points, and that is on there. We're post-pandemic. I mean, we shouldn't be asking drivers, and they're always being picked upon. Don't forget, we've got congestion charges, we've got ultra-low emission zones, we've got all the vehicle bans coming. Was it 25, 35, 40? We don't know what's going to happen then. Everything is about anti-car. And what we should be looking at is ways of improving the environment. And that's one thing that he might actually say, well, I've got a green budget. I'm going to help people. And those are the sorts of things. And that would be very disingenuous.
Well, what he might do, the other thing that he might do, of course, if he does do this, is to say, and it's another incentive rather than it being a sledgehammer bashing you on the top of the head. It's another incentive when you consider buying your next car that it's not a motor car, but an electric car.
Yeah, great. But then what is the true cost of the electric vehicle? That's another. I'll come on your show another time to talk about electric, national grid. We need another 15 nuclear power stations if we all 37 million drivers move to electric vehicles. And how do you, if you're in the 15th floor of a high-rise flat, how do you charge your vehicle? All these sorts of things haven't been thought about. There's 100 years of oil in this earth still left. And what we need to do is get that out and use it cleanly. Euro 6 vehicles, that's the latest specification that the EU has set in terms of what comes out in terms of emissions, are the best ever. I'm not joking. Emissions have fallen in the last decade by 50% in London alone. The fact that we've got great clean cars, we need to incentivise people to move to cleaner vehicles, not hit them in the pocket with draconian taxes.
Okay, if the Chancellor of the Exchequer has his consultation with Grant Shapps, the Transport Minister, and they agree that the arguments that they've heard from Howard Cox and others are compelling and therefore they won't do it, how do you then explain yourself to pensioners who will have to take a hit on, say, the triple lock or people trying to save for their pension in the future? Because if you've got it's true, Howard, if you've got an overdraft of £320 billion, something's got to give. And if it's not going to be fuel tax, then it's got to be something else. You're going to have to explain that to the pensioners.
Well, I'm just writing an article for The Sun, recording a driver's budget and what they suggest. We've got 1.7 million supporters, and we've had a poll recently of 25,000 in the space of 48 hours. And I asked exactly that question, Alastair, and you're absolutely right to ask it. And their big thing is actually, obviously, overseas aid. That should be, for the next 2 years, that should be dropped. They were also saying things like, but do a delivery tax for online orders, sales, etc., and go for people like Google, FaceTime, Apple, who are not paying the right sorts of tax. And if you add those figures together, we get close to actually paying off that extra money that's been borrowed for COVID.
Fascinating. Chatting, you're quite right about Robert Halfon, but with his education hat on. I was just talking to him and Vic Goddard about going back to schools. And one of the themes that Vic Goddard was saying as a head of an academy, that he kind of feels in his bubble as if he's operating with ministers and government departments that actually, there are so many, not kites, but balls in the air that just not getting a grip. I mean, I presume you talk quite regularly to Grant Shapps, and maybe you talk directly to the Treasury. I don't know. But do you have a sense as a lifelong campaigner that this lot have got a grip?
I'm afraid not. They haven't. I mean, unfortunately, most of the people that are advising Grant Shapps and to some extent the Treasury tend to actually arrive at work in Lycra. The most of them are cyclists. And I'm not anti-cycling, but unfortunately, to put £2 billion into new cycle lanes, create more congestions in various cities, particularly London, it is absolutely madness. We should be focusing on ourselves, on our health, yes. But one of the things to get out in terms of making our health better is actually have a great economy. And all that's happening at the moment is we've got a ghost town in terms of London. We've got to get people back to work. We've got to get people back to using their vehicles. And I'm afraid the best PPE, the best securest way of actually preventing getting this virus is sitting in a car, not sitting in a train. And unfortunately, we've got a horrible... an idiot of a mayor in London who's put 30% tax increase on the congestion charge just when we shouldn't be doing that. And I've been on this the talkRADIO, particularly Mike Graham's show, many times talking about this. And this government has lost touch with the motorists. And they're coming out with anti-car policies. And there's 37 million of them. And a lot of them voted Tory. I actually wrote an article in The Sun around the election time recommending the best party for motorists are the Conservatives. I'm beginning to regret that.
It's always a pleasure talking to you, Howard Cox, always so well-informed and always so determined. Folk listening will make their minds up, but you couldn't have been clearer.